Good evening, ladies, gentlemen. Welcome to the Nextier Power Dialogue. My name is Godswill Ugochukwu. It's my pleasure. I'm highly delighted to welcome every last one of us here tonight to participate in the 33rd session of the Nextier Power Dialogue. Nextier Power Dialogue is a monthly public discourse that aims to highlight three cardinal objectives: share ideas, share information about the sector, advocate policy positions in the sector, and highlight key investment opportunities in the sector. Tonight, as we already know, we are discussing a very critical topic: Nigeria's power sector, market, and coordination and governance. So tonight, we hope that over the next 2 hours, we'll be able to have some insightful conversations around issues that have resulted across the value chain due to lack of market coordination. We'll also be able to attain a holistic consensus on what should be done to drive the sector forward. Within the next 2 hours, we'll also intend to stir our collective thoughts towards finding opportunities, towards finding innovative solutions to be able to move the sector forward. We can all agree that for this sector to be able to really move forward, we need to have a proper and effective coordination. We need to have a proper market structure that guides how each player, each participant operates in this sector. It's about that time, and that's why we are here tonight. And our interactions tonight will be moderated by Mr. Tunde Bajumo. He's an outstanding energy professional with about 26 years career in IPP development and energy finance that has spanned across several geographies, including Ghana, Mauritania, Tanzania, Liberia, including Nigeria. Prior to his appointment as the Deputy Chief of Party of the Nigerian Power Sector Program, he was the Commercial Director and Board Member of AES Nigeria Barge Limited, and was also involved in overseeing the development of 300 megawatts AES power plant in Lagos. That power plant is widely acknowledged as the first independent power plant in Nigeria. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming the moderator and the panelists, and let the conversations begin tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. You're all welcome. Thank you very, very for the very nice introduction. Let me first start off by commending Patrick and the Nextier team for putting this together. We need to continue these conversations about the sector. Clearly, the power sector in Nigeria is not where it needs to be, and it's obvious that coordination and the interaction between market participants has become a very difficult problem to resolve. And that's why we're here today. So before I go ahead, I'm going to introduce the panelists. We're very privileged to have eminent people here today to help steer the conversation. And I will start with the female because, of course, I have a gender bias. So I'm going to start with Mrs. Jumoke Delano. She's a lawyer of more than 23 years experience. She graduated from University of London, Queen Mary. She started her career in banking, and she's currently Company Secretary, Legal Advisor of Abuja Electricity Distribution Company. Please a round of applause for Jumoke. Okay. The next panelist is Engineer Lami Adu, who's MD of Mainstream Energy. He started his career with Borno State Government and then moved over to NEPA, where he rose through the ranks and became the MD of Jeba Electricity Company. Since then, he's migrated and he's now MD of Mainstream Energy, covering Kainji and Jeba Hydros. He has a background in mechanical engineering. He's fellow of so many law institutes that I will probably take a long time to read through here, but there's Koren, NSC, and so on. Please, a round of applause for engineer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not the least is engineer Tony Uwa, who is a very well qualified engineer with more than 30 years experience. He was a pupil engineer with NEPA, then PHCN, rose through the ranks and became managing director of transmission services provider. Please, a round of applause for Engineer Uwa.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for all coming here. Well, I'm going to put Jumoke on the spot because the distribution companies are the popular punching bags in the sector. Why do distribution companies reject load?
Well, talk about putting on the spot. That's a direct question if I ever heard one. Rejecting load. I think there's a lot more to it. You need to actually look at the issue from one end, of the value chain to the other. I would not say that the distribution companies reject load. I would rather say that the distribution companies have a preference for where they want the load to be directed. I would also say that it's good to check what each distribution company is contracted, to collect from a transmission company of Nigeria. So I think those are the issues. The challenge that we're looking at today is the issue of coordination and what has caused, what has the lack of coordination caused. So in answering that question, you must look at the fact that what is the contracted capacity for each disco? And is each disco keeping to that contracted capacity? And in the engagements between TCN and the discos with respect to where this load should be directed.
Thank you. We're actually supposed to go to opening remarks, but I wanted to put you on the spot. Do you have anything else to add to that?
Well, I think the power sector is an extremely fascinating, I've never had a more interesting job in my whole life. It's certainly not an easy, if you want a 9-to-5 job, it's not the place to be. But, with the myriad of challenges come myriad of opportunities also, because once you get it right, and a lot of countries have gotten it right, it will galvanize the country on the way to economic development. So, I'm glad to be in the power sector, confronting, those challenges, and I'm happy to be here, contribute to the solutions that will be preferred this evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So I will go to Engineer Uwa for opening remarks about sector governance and the issues.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. The power sector in Nigeria, it's something everybody talks about. It's so because everybody knows a lot of expectations and nothing is coming. People will come in and say that they will solve the problem, the problems continue. If we look at the history of the power sector, before we got to this point, we had a vertically integrated utility that was in charge of generation, transmission, and distribution, and solely responsible for sale of power. We worked, and to a large extent, we were able to deliver. However, we didn't meet the expectations because the efficiency was quite low, and government funding was going down. Eventually, they thought of breaking down the place and giving discos and gencos out to private hands to see if efficiencies will be improved. No sooner than that happened, we started having another set of problems. Gencos, in all sincerity, have been seen to have made huge investments, doing very well. Transmission, equally by NIPP and some projects, have ramped up capacities. I am sorry to say that discos apparently have not been able to deliver the power to people because gencos generate transmission, transmit as much as required downstream, but we still have problems of power not being evacuated completely. It results in recrimination and counter-recrimination amongst the stakeholders. So basically, we'll see that there's no real communication. There is no sincerity. And until we become very sincere to ourselves, communicate properly as soon as it's necessary, learn to be our brother's keeper, know that if one part of the system is not functioning well, the whole system cannot function because everything must work well before it works well.
The discos are the problem. So just take note of that when
The
responding.
discos are not the problem.
So take note of what he said so that we can have some entertaining engagement today. Engineer, opening remarks about level of coordination and corporate governance.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy that this discussion is looking at the power sector actually as a value chain. Unfortunately, that has not been the case with the stakeholder, that is the government, because if they had considered the power sector as a value chain as it were, the disconnect that exists today, I think may not have been at the level it is. Because definitely I, as a generator, cannot discount what happens at the distribution end. Because at the end of the day, the ripple effect comes back to me.
Correct.
Yes, so we just have to get it right from the beginning. But I don't think it's the case today because if the government has actually looked at the issues, everybody keep talking about distribution, not taking load, no investment. We all know that they are not taking load, there is no investment. What are the issues? How long will it take us to resolve those issues? For how long will the government continue to come with intervention?
Correct.
There's so much there, so much money in the industry today that needs to be unlocked. And so long as that is not done, we just have to get it right. I will expect the government to really, I will use the word, bite the bullet and take decision at solving this problem at the disco end that refused to leave us to progress in the sector. Because it's very frustrating for me as a generator today to have a capacity that cannot be utilized after making this huge investment. When we took over the two power plants at Kaenji and Jeba, actually Kaenji was 0 megawatt when we took over from PSCN. Today we are up to 440 megawatt and more counting. We have installed capacity now of 922 available at the two plants. But there was never a time that more than 600 megawatt has been taken onto the grid. What happens? And you still expect me to make more investment. That doesn't make sense. So we all need to look at what is the service level agreement that the discourse had with the government.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's the only way to go forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for that contribution. Jumoke, maybe you should take notes as we go along because it seems like most of this is about you.
I'm so popular.
You're very popular. But, engineer, I want to take you up on something. So, we're really talking about the coordination between market operators.
Yeah.
So, between generators and TCN,
Yes.
there are issues.
Yes.
So, you have frequent system collapses that then affect your own maintenance factor on your side. We have your problems with embed, you're not being paid in full. There are issues with the regulator with regard to some of the new bilateral models that you're thinking of.
Yeah.
I want you to speak to some of the issues that you have between you and TCN, between you and the regulator, because you don't really interact with Jumoke. She's far down the line. So I wanted to understand what your own coordination issues are.
Yeah, we can look at it in many ways, but practically speaking, we have some technical issues between the GEMCOs and transmission, the interface issues. In fact, even communication issues. Today, TCN doesn't have a reliable SCADA system for coordination between the system operator, NCC, and the generating companies. We still receive instructions most of the time through telephone. I mean, the NCC giving instruction to our control room through phone calls. How do you document it? How reliable can that documentation be? We have what they call generation dispatch tool, which is not still fully not up to speed. We can't really rely on it completely for, getting instruction from the system operator as to what the operators are supposed to do. So this brings a lot of issues between us and TCM because most of the time when they try to guess as to what is the cause of a system collapse, for example, if a system collapse was a result of maybe a unit that pulled out of the system, it becomes very difficult for them to know which of the power plants or which of the generating units actually caused the problem because there's no proper technology in place to be able to allow them to know exactly what is happening. So that brings a lot of argument between us. Sometimes they wrongly accuse a station, and then at the end of the day they were like, okay, no, it's not you, it's the other. That's not the way to go. Okay. At this point in time, we should be beyond that. Yes, and of course, we all know about the frequency issue. By the requirement of the grid code, our generating units are supposed to be on free governor mode of operation to be able to assist in regulating the frequency. But it was assumed that the frequency will not be as it is today. The fluctuation is so much that the wear and tear on our generating units can only be imagined. Yes, TCN, they are improving a little bit on managing the frequency. But as it is today, the level of fluctuation is so much that most of the time we operate, as a result of this free governor, we operate outside the band, which is not healthy to the generators. Yeah. Again, increasing cost on us. In addition to the fact that our generating units are made to operate below their capacity because of the high frequency. They deload when the frequency goes up. That one is there. Then you talk about the commercial. Even after you've issued invoice, which is usually confirmed by TC and everything. Everybody knows what is happening. We don't get paid. In addition to the fact that you are not able to evacuate your available energy. So the beating is so much on us as generating companies. And we find it very difficult to actually convince our shareholders or investors to be able to invest more. Because even with the one we have right now, it's not being utilized, and the one that is taken is not being paid for. Yes, the government came up with this eligible customer framework, which actually to me is laudable because as of today, Mainstream Energy Solutions is the only generating company that is actually into this. But it's still falling short of our expectation because the regulator, which is supposed to be the midwife of this, is not helping matters as it were, because there are hiccups. We are now into almost the second year after the declaration, but many issues are not resolved. The CTC charges are not there, and a lot of issues are still waiting to be resolved, which I believe this is the surest way of cushioning the effect of what is happening on the grid, on the generating stations.
Okay. So I want you to gather your thoughts on how can coordination improve the situation. So we talked about the frequent system collapses and how it affects you.
Yes.
And we talked about the new eligible customer. How can coordination help to resolve those issues? But I'll stop you there because I think we need to go to Engineer Ua because you threw one at him.
I wanted to say something before.
Okay, please go.
Yes, in terms of coordination. Now I'm not talking as a generator. I just want to talk as a player in the industry. I think the transmission company has a lot to do in really working very closely with the discos to see how they can resolve some of the issues that the discos normally bring up as to whether they are not getting the power where they want the power, or some of their heavy load centers are not being given enough energy. These are things that if TCN and the discos can sit down and work very closely, they can unlock that and enable us, the generators, to push more power onto the distribution companies.
I think the relationship is very toxic. Even between your associations, they have very combative.
Yes.
You have the association of generators. I think Dr. Joy is here.
Yes.
And then the Mr. Oduto, and it's a combative. It's not collaborative.
We should not be.
Yeah. So
ordinarily, it should not be. That's why I say we should look at the sector as a value chain. Correct. Whatever happens at one end affects me directly or indirectly.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't be looking at this thing in isolation.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, everybody creates a kind of cocoon around himself.
Yeah, it's quite toxic and needs to be resolved.
Yes.
Engineer Ua, so TCN is being accused of not coordinating the system. And that's why we have not only load rejection, we have frequent system collapses, and it seems to be disorganized. Would that be correct?
Yeah. As perceived. Let me start from the interface issue he raised. You started by saying that when you took over Kainji, the generation was 0. Kainji was the very first big plant we have that is still in existence. If the plants, all of them have gone down that time, it means that the switch gears also may have gone with them. And by the time I left, I know TCN has a big program of replacing all the 330 kV circuit breakers. We had similar issues at Egbe, and we are taking them. So certainly, before long, the interface problems would be something of the past.
Let me just interject you there. You're saying that there's been some investment that will stop these frequent system collapses.
Well, I started with interface problem. System collapse is a different kettle of fish. Okay. The issue of system collapse is something everybody has a share in. The basic equation, power equation, is that at any instant, the real power you are generating should balance the real load plus losses in transmission. If you get that, the frequency should be 50 hertz. If there is a mismatch, if the load is more than the generation, the frequency will go down. If the generation is more than the load, the frequency will go up. If we have a system and suddenly we lose, because the machines we have, they are synchronous machines. They're all running at the same frequency. If we have problems somewhere in a power plant, for instance, and we lose a chunk of generation, you expect the frequency would go down. And if there is no control immediately, it will continue going down until it collapses.
Well, if you're waiting for a phone call, then that will be a problem.
You cannot, it's real-time issue. Phone call cannot solve it. We have systems built in. We're supposed to have a spinning reserve. We're supposed to have the frequency. But the spinning reserve, I'm not sure every GENCO is willing to provide spinning reserve.
Yeah.
Secondly, the under-frequency relays, the discos have a way of bypassing under-frequency relays because the frequency of trip on those feeders are quite high. So they will prefer diverting the load some other place. So if we have an emergency like that, the schemes built into the system to help protect the system, they are not there. And the system operator cannot do anything. Unfortunately, even knowing exactly what happened takes some time because the supervisory and data acquisition control, the SCADA, is not available. We have started this SCADA a long time ago. And by the time we complete any one, it's gone obsolete. And we'll start another one. So we have SCADA working in a few locations, but it's not complete. They're working on, I think the Siemens are trying to come back to see if they can complete part of the SCADA. So,
can I ask you one question?
Yeah.
Why do you give discos load where they don't need it?
Well, I would like to ask Disco one question. The feeders we give those loads, they're tertiary heavy feeders. Transmission never built any tertiary heavy feeder. They're all distribution feeders. They're all distribution feeders.
Yeah, but they want to be able to tell you where to give them the load.
Yes. I think we should be able to energize feeders that they want us to energize. And I mean, it doesn't make sense if the transformers are there, the generation is there, we refuse to give your feeder, give power to the feeder you're asking for. I think the basic issue is that we give load to all the feeders and maybe they're not able to collect. Some feeders are tagged non-collectibles. I think that's a basic issue.
True. Yeah. Thank you very much. I think this is a great time to bring Jumoke into the conversation. So you've heard, you're rejecting load. You are the punching bag of everybody in the sector. What do you think we can do in terms of coordination and governance that can improve the situation of distribution companies?
Before I answer that question, I'd like to just comment on what Engineer Owa said about some feeders, non-collectible feeders. Our obligation, when we signed up for, going into the DISCO, it was to reduce ATC and C losses. And so, in fact, recently, just over the weekend, I was reading about a DISCO that had color-coded its feeders. So there are green feeders, there are yellow feeders, and there are red feeders. depending on how much you can collect. And I think it's only wise that you do not pump, energy to a place where you will not be able to recover. It's the prudent thing to do where there's an energy deficit. So why not pump it into the areas where these people can pay, for the electricity. So that is just a comment. Now, in terms of coordination, I think the power sector is quite regulated. There's a huge amount of documentation, that specifies roles and responsibilities, what each person should do. So I think one of the major problems has been, keeping, to this documentation that we have, we read, but how much of this documentation is operational in terms of what the regulator should do, what the DISCO should do, what the TCN should do, what the GENCOs should do. So we have a lot of documentation, which if we were keeping to those, the terms of those documents, then I think there would have been significant progress. And then the issue also is about sequencing. There are a lot of initiatives that come out of the regulator, even in terms of policy, which show a desire for there to be traction, a desire for there to be movement. But, have we considered the impact of these initiatives across the value chain? So in bringing up initiatives, you must not just address one aspect, but you must address, the whole chain. One issue that people don't like to mention, but which is a critical issue for the DISCOs, is the lack of implementation of the minor reviews. Those minor reviews have not been implemented in the last over 2 years now, which, if they were implemented, at least would have been able to dimension what is the gap in terms of the tariffs and what adjustments need to be made. Now, there's also some flexibility by the time you dimension the gap to decide how there are various options as to how this gap can be plugged. Now, if there was a commitment to implement those minor reviews over 2+ years, then I think we would have seen some changes. So, keeping to the terms and, starting from the beginning of the chain all the way to the end, I think proper sequencing of the initiatives is fine. One of the issues we also discover is that we find somewhat conflicting in the host of documentation that is available. You have regulations that may conflict. And I will give you an example. Irrespective of the fact that the tariff is suppressed, the DISCOs there's this regulation called the Supplementary Term Order, where DISCOs are supposed to pay NIBOR plus 10 on any unpaid bills. They cannot pass this on to customers. So that is a big deal. Now, because of this accumulated interest, the deficit in the tariff 1, accumulated interest 2, now you have a huge debt overhang on the balance sheets of the DISCOs. And if you take whoever wants to invest in you, whoever wants to lend to you, would examine your viability as a business. And if they find out that, the cost at which you are selling electricity, which should bring inflows, is suppressed, then that prudent investor is going to have a challenge.
Thank you for that intervention. So across board, I think, panelists, I'd like you to think about what you would do if you could personally, yourself, intervene in policy and regulation. How would you help to solve this problem of coordination? And I will start with the engineer. I think the top 3 things that you would do if you could influence policy and regulation to resolve the problems of coordination and corporate governance in the sector.
Okay. First of all, I did slightly mention about what can be done, because so long as you don't solve this downstream issue, we'll continue to talk stories for years to come. If I'm in a position today, either to take decision or to come up with a policy, I will look at the direction as to how, because the discourse keep talking about tariff, that is also, according to them, not making them to invest, because the major issue is that their infrastructure is not just up to speed with what is expected, and they keep talking about the tariff. So we should look at electricity business in real business terms. We should remove too much politics out of it. So long as you begin to think about what will happen politically, you will not be able to solve the commercial issues. This, I urge the government to really
focus on.
Yes, focus on that. That's the only way to go. The discourse, what is it that is impeding their ability to invest? If it is tariff issue, you look at it. If it is their incompetence to manage, then take decision.
Sure.
You take the license away and give to those people that are ready to invest. These are hard decisions, but I mean, you have to take a decision anyway.
So you will withdraw the license of the discourse?
Yes, if yes.
Okay.
If that is the only way to go forward, yes.
Okay, that's not good for Jumoke, but so
No?
I want to take you back to the issues that are Genco related. You know, your dispatch with TCN, you know, if we continue to have this frequent system collapses, it will
Yes.
affect your equipment,
Sure.
it increases your maintenance factor. What can we do from a policy standpoint that will help that coordination? So your thoughts on what you think?
Yeah, what we have observed is that, yes, TCN in the recent past, maybe 3 years, have actually improved in the way they approach issues. But we are still not yet there, because there's still some bureaucracy here and there. Because I've always maintained the fact that you cannot run an industry like the power industry, whether it's generation or transmission, through appropriation. It will not work. We'll only be deceiving ourselves.
So you think
have to allow.
TCN should be privatized as well? These are
Yes.
very radical views today. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
You cannot run through appropriation.
Okay.
So you have to create an environment where people can invest. Right now, through this eligible customer discussion we'll be having with TCN, we've discovered that the management of TCN is creating a channel where people can really invest in transmission lines and get, recover their investment through the wheeling charges.
So you're thinking of maybe concessioning some lines
Yes.
rather than
Those,
selling the whole thing?
exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, I take your point. Jumoke, the top 3 things that you would do to fix this coordination and corporate governance issues in the sector?
Okay. For me, the first will be the addressing the tariff issue. Because in terms of sequencing, I believe that is fundamental to allowing investments to begin to flow into the sector. That's number 1. Number 2 would be an overhaul of the regulations, the codes. They have, these codes were developed at different times. But from time to time, there should be a cohesiveness, a review, to find out whether, the situations that existed when those laws, regulations, codes, orders were implemented, if the situation is still the same. Now, the third thing I would do in terms of dispute resolution would be to recommend the introduction of a tribunal, such that if you had issues with decisions of the regulator, you could appeal those decisions to that tribunal. There's a recent act with CPC, Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Act, where the decisions of the commission are appealed to a tribunal. Now that helps to reduce the rush to the high courts, and it would also quicken the pace at which disputes, if you have any disputes with the regulator, can be addressed.
So this will be like an external, it will essentially be going to court, except it's not
It's
separate.
specialized.
It's a special
and
court.
then they are in the composition of the tribunal will be independent.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And this is being driven because there have been decisions from NEC that we are all not comfortable with.
There are decisions from NEC, yes, but there are also some decisions from the courts who are not, because of the evolution of the power sector and the changes that have taken place, who are not really familiar with the technicalities of the sector and are just getting familiar with them.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Excellent. Engineer, who are your top 3 things that you would do to improve coordination and governance?
First of all, the issue of collapses, how to bring it down. We cannot, transmission infrastructure take long time to build. So I'd like us to look at what we have now and how we can manage better to reduce these collapses that cost a lot of money and place a lot of burden on the generating plants. What causes instability? It's fault. If you have a fault on the system, if you have, that is one. If you have loss of chunk of load, it is 2. If you have loss of generation, it is 3. From transmission, we know that the transmission lines will have more than 16,000 kilometers of 330 kV transmission lines. If we're able to maintain a healthy trace, that would, because more than 85% of faults of transmission are due to faults on the lines. And I'd like to say that the lines, they've worked so much on the lines. If you look at transmission lines now, they're a lot different from what they used to be. So we can say that the likelihood of faults have been reduced. Secondly, we would like to get cooperation from GENCOs, cooperation and understanding from GENCOs and DISCOs. If we have a situation, we have an emergency, and KNG is asked to drop a unit, let them not be reluctant to drop a unit, because if you don't drop a unit, the whole system will go. If it goes, it will affect everybody. If we have a situation and we ask Lagos to drop load, they should not wait for some other person to do it, because the system operator may have seen the quantum of load he needs to drop to restore the system to stability. So we need cooperation from GENCOs and DISCOs to be able to realize some degree of stability and to minimize the incidence of system collapses.
Okay.
Good.
You have more points? I have, I was just thinking, that friction between yourselves, TCN rather, and the DISCOs. How can that be resolved such that it's more collaborative rather than combative? or maybe we should ask.
Yes, I think the best, what these schools can do is if you have your priority feeders, you should be able to send a list of your priority feeders to TCN, and TCN certainly will listen to you, because we cannot continue shouting of load rejection if you have those feeders healthy and will refuse to put power on them. So I think that could be done bilaterally. Each disco should make a list of their own priority feeders and discuss with TCN.
Okay.
They'll be
The
obliged.
second point that we haven't discussed in great detail here is how is it that TCN determines which plants are dispatched? Is it based on least cost?
Yes. Theoretically, it should be based on least cost. But the nature of the grid now, with independent generators, people have invested and they want to sell the power. If we look at it, we know that hydro will come cheapest. But then, some of the generators, they have taken gas. It's take or pay. So whether they take the gas or not, they're forced to pay. And if you keep on taking on hydro, those other gencos will go under. So it's something government has to look at carefully. And,
So there's no formula today as to how this dispatch order.
No, they have.
Is it at the discretion?
Yeah,
of,
there's dispatch order.
there's a dispatch order.
There's dispatch order.
Okay,
You
good.
know?
I think I'm going to
I'm
let.
sure they are keeping to it.
Okay.
But no matter what order you have, somebody somewhere must complain.
So we're
So
going
it
to.
calls for understanding also.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. We're going to go to the audience, but I wanted Jumoke to chime in on how can you improve this relationship with TCN?
Well, I think he has mentioned something which has already, I think they've started doing, which is the notification of the priority feeders to TCN. So that is a key way to improve the relationship. The other thing is that TCN is doing a lot of expansion and improving its network. That should also be done in conjunction with the discos, so that they are aware that, okay, this is being planned. They are also prepared to strengthen whatever networks within the disco network that need to be upgraded in order to, so that we're working seamlessly. As as was said here, it's all part of the value chain. And what affects one party affects the others, so that there can be some synergy, real synergy between the
An integrated
participants.
resource plan, basically. I think that's the message that we're all getting here. Then, engineer, because you are hydro, we seem to have left out the gas-fired power plants. They clearly have a lot more problems because they still have to pay for gas. You're sitting pretty, and regardless of what happens, you get paid. So,
It's not,
can you chime in on the gas?
It's not. You see, it's not just sitting pretty. He mentioned one aspect of the fact that the hydros, we produce the cheapest power.
Yes.
And whenever it is not utilized, it's a Nigerian consumer that is being denied cheap energy. But you also have to consider that the hydros are concessionaires. We pay concession fee.
Okay.
Yes. And so how do we get that fee to pay? And in fact, by the concession agreement, we're even expected to pay in dollars. Wow. Where do we get the money if we don't generate and sell?
Wow. Absolutely.
So we are not just sitting pretty. We are really sitting on...
Yes. No,
Yes,
I'm just drawing your attention to the fact that the gas people have...
I understand.
Yeah.
Yes, but the whole thing, the world over, dispatch is based on economic dispatch. You dispatch the cheapest ones first before. It's all over. We all know. That's the standard. Yeah, that's one. Talking about cooperation with TCN, when he was in the office, he knew that we approached TCN because having realized the level of reliability of the equipments at our two switchyards, we approached them to see how mainstream can actually, having understood or appreciated the financial situation they are in. We agreed, our board gave us approval to work with them to see how we can actually make investment to upgrade these equipments. He is aware.
So you made the investment on it?
Yes, in fact, even today, I approved some equipments to be installed at Kainji switcher.
How do you recover that investment? Is it
in fact, that's another thing. Because if we don't take action, the repercussion, the consequences will be more than what we'll spend in bringing this equipment in place.
But are you able to, for instance, deduct it from your charge, your willing charge to TCN?
Yes, he knows, we are working on a formula on how we can recover, but really we cannot wait. That's the point I want us to understand.
Okay. Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if I lose one generating unit as a result of simple tripping coil at the switchyard that refuses to open a 33 kV breaker, you know the consequences.
Absolutely.
So we go out of our way to see how we can rectify these things. It's part of the coordination. It's a value chain. If this thing doesn't work right, it affects me.
Absolutely.
And you now have to realize the thinking. I'm now thinking as a businessman, not as a government worker any longer.
Yeah.
Of which TCN still is.
So we're going to throw it open to the audience. I don't know if we have microphones.
Who is it that they don't care, or is it that they don't know, or is it that there are some special interests which are taking precedence on the general interest?
Thank you. I'm going to find you think Ned's thoughts are about this dysfunctionality, if you like.
To speak on behalf of NERC, that's really a bit of a challenge. But I'm certain that they're aware, because there is no limit to the documentation that our speaker for the discos submit to them monthly, weekly, annually. They do open book reviews, they review our audited accounts, and they also review, correspondences where the schools are seeking intervention in one issue or the other.
Okay, let me make it easy. I think I'll go across board so that we answer your question. Engineer, in your view, do we have a capable independent regulator?
You are putting me on a cross.
It's your job.
I want to do that, sorry.
It's the moderator's job.
Yes.
I don't want to say that. So
I'm not actually competent to say whether, yes, I'm not competent, but the point I want to make is that having interacted with them, because of course we have had different commissions over time. So, and definitely they have all been different in their approach. The willingness to act have all been different. That's a fact. Yes, but I think sometimes, I mentioned about political will. The regulator sometimes is, most of the time I would say, bedeviled by their ability to override some political influence.
okay.
That is my position.
Well, let me just comment and talk about the proposed power sector economic plan. Now, that was an initiative of the policymakers, which I'm sure the regulator would have been a part of. And no plan is perfect, but it had a lot of good, initiatives embedded in it. And we look forward from, I think, 2018, we were actually very eager and had even adjusted our plans in order to accommodate the potential effects of the power sector economic plan if implemented. However, after a while, we just stopped hearing anything about it. But it was a very good document, but we don't know where they are with that matter.
Sir, do we have an independent, fair-minded regulator?
To some extent. NEC is doing a difficult job under difficult circumstances. Because NEC is not very free. It's not very free. That's my thing. That's my thing. Thank you. I think we have, I've been saying this is to you now, I think we have very capable people in there. Different things have happened. There's been an evolution. Macroeconomic variables have moved against the sector, and they are in a very tough place. There are tough decisions to be made. No doubt these decisions have to be made soon. So we will give them this feedback that people are a bit hesitant to comment on their independence. But thank you very much for that question. Do we have another question?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I will first start with a comment before I ask my question.
Okay.
The comment I want to make is about general disco, because I came from the disco sector of the industry. That the discos have a lot of problems developing. The issue of the metering, this issue of the thing about priority customer. They felt that what they have inherited it was just enough to bring them money, forgetting that they needed to do investment to direct the power to where they need. Like the legal woman said, another company has marked their leaders. I tell you, I get about 22 hours supply in my area. Others get about 6 hours. Right now, that disco is trying to bring 11 kV feeders to make commercial, the one that customers are paying. So there's actually a need for the discos. It's not the transmission that decides why to take, because the transmission only controls 33 kV feeders, and they are supposed to be discos feeder, not transmission. They are supposed to direct by the power. The other issue, the question I want to ask is for the discos, why are they frustrating the eligible customer scheme? From some of the customers who I've spoken with, who wants to take supply directly from the TCL, because their tariff, their cost will reduce. There seems to be opposition from the discos. Why is it so?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Joy. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. I have a comment and then a question. Maybe I should take the question first. I heard for the first time that the discos have contracted quantity of power they are expected to take. My question to TCN is, are discos keeping to that contracted quantity? And that quantity, is it in line with the contracted quantities of the GENCOs? That's my question to TCN. Now, my comment. I think today's discussion is meant to focus on corporate governance, coordination, and I think generally the management of the sector. When we look at corporate governance, I think what we want to look at is who are the people in charge of coordinating the sector. And by virtue of the privatization, for the legacy plants, BP is the midwife. So it has monitoring and oversight function over the both generating and distribution companies. And then NEC has a critical role as the licensing authority. So by virtue of the licenses, it has a critical role to coordinate the sector. Now the question from all that we've been discussing is, this coordination, are we having it? A situation where the coordinating entity calls the market participant for information, for data, and based on what you submit is what they use to assess you. I think we need to ask ourselves, do we really have coordination? I believe we are on autopilot, and I believe at the end of this discussion we may appoint a coordinator because the sector is on autopilot. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Academy Francis, my name. I present Abuja School. Yes, I've listened attentively to the discussion and the line, the way it's been going. It has always been a blame game from the GENCOs to ZCN to the DISCOs. You see, I normally tell the story of how I joined the power sector. You know, before I joined the power sector, actually I was preparing an action against all the participants in the power sector, including the DISCOs, the GENCOs, and the transmission company of Nigeria. Eventually I found myself in the DISCO. So my eyes are open. Yes, I dropped the case. Yes. I didn't know. I think if I had gone to court, I wouldn't have entered the DISCO because I had a lot of about 30 lawyers that were ready to join me for that action. Because I got tired of all this blame game. The transmission company of Nigeria was blaming the DISCOs, go for a discourse like this. There's still blame the GENCOs is blaming the DISCOs. The Power Sector Reform Act, gave each and every one of them, an obligation, which are different. It's no longer power holding company as we used to have it that was in control of everything. I want to believe that the best way for this, for the power sector to grow is for all the parties that are involved to come together. I appreciate that there are parties in the same vehicle, traveling through the same road. Unless we appreciate this, things will definitely not move well. Because the GENCOs need the DISCOs to get the money. The transmission company also needs the DISCOs to collect the money. And the duty is a very enormous one. Now that I'm in the DISCO, I know what it takes. Is it going down the whole DISCO coverage area to get people to pay their bill? A lot of people are bypassing their meters. You have a lot of staff you have to pay. A lot of investment is involved. We need to appreciate our positions in this, and the more we appreciate it, and the more the regulator understands this, it will be in a better position to actually find solution to the power sector.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Stephen Magaji. I have a question here. One of the objectives within this program today is that we will discuss strategies that will enable least cost electricity generation, movement, transmission, and distribution. Now, this sector is a game of numbers. The quantum of electricity determines the cost. The lower the amount of electricity you get, the higher the cost you expect. One of the key factors that determines tariff is that quantity for the distribution companies. I have read a lot of papers, and I've read some papers where they say the distribution companies have only received about 3,500 megawatts of electricity. As a result of that, NEC is being compelled to raise the tariff very, very high. I attended a couple of forums around the country when they had it in Lagos, Port Harcourt, Abuja, and other things, when they were talking about eligible customers. I went there. Then I asked NEC, if the basis for determination of tariff is what I decide to take, not what is available, is that fair on Nigerians? There is 7,000 megawatts ready to go, and I decide on my own that I will close my feeders and take only 3,000. And then on the base of 3,000, you want to give me a double tariff as a Nigerian. I told them that was not right. And so we have the lady here, madam. As a distribution company, the question has been asked. The quantum of what you say you have, or that the capacity you have requested, I believe that's a day-ahead declaration for the GENCO, for instance. TCN will be able to answer that question and tell us whether there is equity. The generating company said, I want to give you 5,000. The distributor said, you want to take 3,000. Of course, you can't store power, so you have to give them 3,000. I don't want to answer that question for you will answer that question. But for the distribution company, is it right to take less power without finding innovative ways of franchising networks or lines that you think you cannot collect. You keep big areas in darkness, large estates, large corridors, some states, even in darkness, that you cannot collect, because I've confronted one or two chairmen of discos, and I've asked them, why can you not concession this line or franchise this line? They said because they will need to spend some money, and they don't want to spend that money, which is not appropriated by the sector. Is that right? If they cannot do the business, why not leave it and go?
Thank you. From now, the discos, the business model of the Nigerian disco will be the same. Will it be the same sort of distribution company that we have today? Or will they change to something different?
Well, I think with every organization, you have to evolve. There is no, I mean, you can't stay static. As the market changes, you all, in order to stay relevant, in order to stay viable, you must evolve. So I don't think you can say that the business model will. We've had to keep on adjusting, the business model. Otherwise, nobody anticipated 5 years before going into the power sector privatization that these were the challenges. So in order for you to stay alive, you must evolve.
So I'm thinking like things like interconnected mini-grids.
Yes.
Would you, eligible customers within your network, perhaps that you are invested in as well, do you see things like that happening, or would you discos just stay where you are?
No, absolutely. As I said, if you don't change, then you become extinct. That's just the way life is. And with the eligible customer regulation, there are some issues that have to do with that regulation. For one is the issues we've had with customers wanting to become eligible is that there is a legitimate requirement within the regulation that these customers should pay off what they owe. And I think it's a very reasonable request. Now, if you are owing a disco, a GENCO that wants to take you as an eligible customer should actually come and ask if there was no requirement like that. That how creditworthy is this customer? Some of these customers owe us huge, unspeakable amount of debt. And then they want to become eligible. Well, pay us off. That's number one. Number two, there is cross-subsidization in the tariff. So because of this cross-subsidization, by the time one eligible customer goes, then the disco must be compensated. There was a forum organized by NERC, I think in the last 1 month or so, where they talked about the competitive, parity charge and the computing of the distribution use of service charge. Those issues are being discussed. These issues must be resolved. And we asked them at that time that, how long would it take for this cost or charges to be determined? Those charges haven't come out yet.
So you're saying if you are kept whole, you have nothing against eligible customers?
We must be kept whole.
Okay, correct. So there's a second question from the last gentleman that spoke. Oh, you want to add something? Okay.
I thought the issue of eligible customership was for new customers.
Finding customers.
Because for new connections. Because I was thinking that for each area that NEC, the market already considered those catchment of customership for each disco. That taking it out, to me too, it's not, I don't think it's a fair deal. While we were discussing somewhere, I thought if you can get new location, like a new company sited in a location that is not being connected to distribution network, then you can get eligible customer from there.
That's not what the regulation says.
No. They're able to take existing customers. I think she's answered the question. Are you satisfied, sir? She's explained that if they are kept whole through maybe the use of distribution charge or some other mechanism that doesn't allow them lose revenue, then they are not against eligible customer. I think that's a straightforward answer. Do you want to add something, sir?
I just want to add to the fact, because I'm in it.
Okay.
I mean, as a
yes, you have the template. Yes.
Exactly. I am not just not having the template only, but I am into the bilateral business. So the issue really is not about whether the customers have made whole the discourse. No, really we don't know why, because all the customers that I have today that I have signed PPA with have settled the discourse. The only thing that NAC said they have not come up with is the CTC charges, which I believe they should have done so by now, because the document is theirs anyway. So why must they wait until this point before they start talking of CTC charges? Okay. So you can see some of the things I was highlighting.
Coordination things.
Yes, coordination issue.
That we need to deal with. So NERC has not finalized the charge, the formula for it.
Yes, but even, this CTC charges is not applicable to a customer that one, because there are customers that have actually made investment in putting 132 line in place.
Correct.
That does not apply to them.
Okay.
But yet some discourse are now saying jurisdiction issue, that customer is within their jurisdiction.
Yeah. But I think we all see...
you see all those complications here and there, just trying to make the thing not flow. But the customers are approaching us because of the inefficiency of the discourse. Ordinarily, why should they come to us? It's because there's a problem.
But I hope you take the
Definitely
point
it's because there's a problem
that Jumoke is making, that there's cross-subsidization. So if you take away all the eligible customers, then their business model
we cannot
collapses.
take all. How many customers there are? You see, the problem is look at the stranded energy we have. How many customers are there?
Yeah.
If really they are taking this power,
and
giving it to the eligible customer in court, they will not come out.
No, but it's the premium customers that you are taking. But let's move on. I want us to take Dr. Joy's question or comment. She makes a valid point that we haven't spent a lot of time discussing maybe the big elephants in the room, BP and NERC, and the fact that that is BP's role. Probably needs to be well defined. They are not. You're interacting with BP, Jumoke. What's your impression of the coordination that happens there?
BPE midwives the transaction, and they have some reporting. They ask for reports. They have some oversight. But the entity that really has the supervisory and coordinating role is NERC. So I think the burden in terms of the weight of coordination, it falls more on the side of NERC.
Okay, but if you are, the point she was making is, so you have performance agreements with BP, and they are custodians of those performance agreements. If the BP relies on you to provide the data as to whether you are performing or not, then the process is compromised. I think that's the point Dr. Joy was making.
Well, the NEC does what is called an open book review. So apart from the reports that you send to them annually, monthly, weekly, they actually come to look at your books, and these reports are shared. Sometimes BP also have people that come.
Okay, so they do audits and things like that. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to say something about coordination. I think what Dr. Joy was referring to is really coordination between all the stakeholders, BPE, NAG, market operations, MBET, and all that. A typical example is, normally there's this capacity test. This is just an example I'm giving. Capacity test that is carried out on our generating units. And in the team, you have NAC, you have MO, you have TCM, right? BP is not there. Now, what we expect is that BP doesn't have to come up with another team to go around the power plants to carry out capacity tests again. These are all government agencies. If there's real coordination, they should get this data from whether it's NAC or MBET or MO. This is exactly typical example of what she is saying.
But that's tricky, sir, because in their performance agreement, they have an obligation to do the capacity test.
Who?
BP.
Yeah.
So, if they abdicate it
what
to
I'm just saying
else,
is that must that means they cannot rely on NAC, and which is actually the regulator.
Maybe
if NAC has the data.
These are some of the things we need to discuss. Does it have to
they
be
need to
any of those people? Could it be an independent engineering firm that does and gives everybody a report?
Yes.
Those are the coordination issues that the sector is faced with that need to be addressed.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. If there's coordination, there's no need.
Then there's no need for it.
Yeah.
Engineer, there was a Dr. Joy threw something at you.
Asked, if these codes are keeping to contracted quantity. I'd like to say yes, most of them. If not, the issue of load rejection will not be there. They are not taking more than they're supposed to.
Yeah, is that fine? Okay.
Yep.
Dr. Joy, do you want to amplify this question? Yes.
Yeah. The market is supposed to be synergized.
Yeah.
Okay? For any quantity that the distribution company must have agreed to take should be in line with what generators have also contracted to.
It should be integrated.
Or declared.
Okay. So if we don't do that and distribution companies are the only people meant to take our power, then there is a disconnect. Please, can I finish? For example, I have 4,000 megawatts available. And if the discos have contracted to take only 2005, the question is the extra 1.5, who is meant to take it? So we need to know, the reason why I'm asking TCN is we are just hearing that discos have a contracted quantity. We were thinking that whatever we have made available is what the discos have signed to take. But from what my sister presented, they have a specific quantity of power they've contracted to take. So if that is the case, I want to know, is it in harmony with what we have contracted with NBET to make available? That's my question, please.
Okay, Dr. Joy, I want to, before you answer, sir, I think Jumoke should respond to this. I don't think she said, sort of capacity.
Dr. Joy, is percentages assigned to each distribution company. So irrespective of the quantum generated, at the end of the day, it still adds up to 100%.
Yeah.
So there should be no energy that is not being sent to the discos.
So this is like 20% of the energy generated is dispatched to the two discos in Lagos.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Engineer Joy, is that clear? That's what she's basically saying.
So if it is percentage, then we have a problem here. Then the percentage, if there's a coordination in the market, we want to know a cumulation of the percentage the discos have contracted. If we have 100% and the discos have contracted for only 46%, then there should be another off-taker that should take
Dr. Joy,
the
you don't understand what she's saying. She's saying when you dispatch all your generation,
yes,
the systems operator allocates that load in percentages to the different discos.
Then that takes all my power?
All the power, then they allocate it to the discos. That's what she's saying.
And I still have over 2,000 left.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yes, I don't know, because as at today, we have about 7,004. If you check what they took, it's about 3,000. So what is happening?
No, Engineer Joy, just to give you an illustration, if you generated 4,000 today, 20% of that 4,000 is allocated to the two discos in Lagos. So 800 megawatts is allocated by the systems operator to the two discos in Lagos. Then I don't know, maybe Abuja gets 10%. I don't know what it is. But the systems operator determines that himself. So the rejection is a completely different argument. So it's allocated to you. You can then reject whatever you want.
Okay, so now you see, this is where we have the coordination problem. I knows how much I am available for.
Yeah.
And then it now allocates what maybe system operator can take to the discos.
Correct.
And then when we ask, why are you not taking all I have? He now tells me that the discos are not taking load.
Correct.
So we need a coordinator. I say we need to appoint a coordinator. I said it.
Totally, we all agree with you on that.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Engineer Benny Jemadu. I think the fundamental problem with this sector is that as Nigerians, we like dancing in circles. We don't like saying, we're not sincere with each other. The truth of the matter is that the coordinator of the sector should be the Ministry of Power. And they do not, the Ministry of Power does not have the intellectual capacity or intellectual firepower to coordinate this industry. So they can't even support the minister in making the appropriate decisions for the sector. The regulator that should have acted as a backup relies also on this Ministry of Power. Then you also have a group at the presidency doing what they're doing, but also don't have the intellectual capacity to run this sector. The truth is that issues will continually arise from the sector as the sector is developing and growing. But you need a competent set of people that can look at these issues and resolve it as they arise on a day-to-day basis. To take everybody back, if you remember, 9 years ago, everybody felt that the constraint in the power sector was the generation. It was a funnel, and I remember that funnel. Whenever you come for a meeting, they'll bring out the funnel. The discos will be jumping up and down, that they're very good. Today, the funnel is inversed. So what should happen, and to hit the nail on the head so we stop dancing around in circles, is that the Ministry of Power has to be properly restructured to run a private sector power industry. Exactly. That is the long and short of all this whole story. Because as I tell you, even if you solve this problem, there are issues of forex. Issues will continuously arise as this industry grows, and those issues have to be solved. So that is one thing the minister, or the minister, this current minister, or the incoming minister of power will need to do for this industry.
Good evening, I'm Engineer Isaac Wedding. With apologies, please, to Ms. Madam Jimoke. I want to say the current discourse we have today, I don't think there's a difference between them and the NEPA we had some years back. I'll say this with regard to what you just said just now. The engineer, the chief executive officer, the mainstream man, please, I sympathize with you, sir.
Thank you.
It is well. You see, from what the last speaker just commented on, I think NEC need to be privatized. Is not privatized, they should be meant to run independently, possibly like we have INEC, though they try to deliver it just for the election. Now to Madam Jimoke, please, it's a question. A situation where, like, let me say the Abuja discourse per se, generation is being done, distribute to Nasarawa, distribute to Abuja, maybe some other environment. I know you're talking about 4 sections within this zone. Now, and you're picking just 11% of power to this region, and there's no proper evaluation, okay, in respect to what is really needed on this zone, and there's excess power lying. You see the Minister of Information made a statement some time ago, sir. I don't think we need to change Babatunde. We need to change those around Babatunde. That's just the truth. He said the government should not be held responsible for lack of power to Nigerians. That the government has actually done its part, and I think they did their part on the generation part. Generation has come into full efficiency and capacity. That is why I'm moving that NEC should either be privatized or it should remain and should reorganize to an independent body. Now, Abuja, if you take a proper evaluation of Abuja, I must tell you, ma'am.
Your question to you.
My question to you is this: if you go to Abuja now, there are some areas that they do what they call load shedding. Someone runs the light from 6 a.m. this morning, right, to to like 6 a.m. the other day, that is tomorrow, light is cut off. Then the other side, right, pick up the light from 6 a.m., run it to the next day, it's cut off. That is what happened. Now the question is, have you actually tried looking at how much revenue is lost within this period of time? What is really the problem? Because I travel now and I keep seeing transformers that have been in existence 10 years ago. In the same transformer I keep seeing, there's no new transformers added. Cable keep failing every single day. That's the truth. Please, I think you need to really tell us something. Are the materials substandard, or human being handling these things are substandard?
Thank you very much.
Please, we should look at it. Please, why the reduction of load when no load keep going on? Thank you.
Thank you.
Acquiring materials. As you know, there's also NEMSA that regulates technical standards within the power sector. And AEDC, the DISCOs are investing. And some people here I've interviewed even this evening have power almost 23 hours of the day. And it's our intention to ensure that everybody, gets, power supply. However, there's also the element of affordability and willingness to pay. And any prudent organization, in getting its energy will decide the best way to allocate that power. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take 2 more questions at the back and then in front here. Where are you? You can come here or go to the back.
I'm a lawyer. I'm not an engineer. Well, we've been speaking about corporate governance. And I know that corporate governance has some parameters. And the one I really would like to focus on is on regulatory best practices. It is said that a chain is as strong as its weak point. I think there's something we need to wrap our hands against, or well, round, concerning regulation of the power sector. We have to stand up, because this is very important. What we are talking about is the faith of this nation. For so long, when we had the bundle system, we've gone through this. We're going through the same thing again. When we're talking of unbundled system, when we're talking of going towards competitive market, we need to be firm that in the regulatory sphere, let us have experts, people who really know what they are talking about. 2, whatever policies that is going to come should be thoroughly, and I'm happy with this, what we're doing today, whatever policy should be thoroughly discussed. Then number 3, if you look at the Act, there are a number of things that depend on the discretion of the Minister of Power. And the question is, when you're talking of moving this sector forward, and you are, putting some things to the discretion of the Minister of Power, for God's sake, we need to have some parameters, and that's corporate governance. You do not have the authority, you don't have the monopoly of things. We need to thoroughly discuss it, look at the parameters, and set up a system so that whenever anything is going to be done, we know that it's done based on system, not based on persons. So if we want to move this sector forward, gentlemen and ladies, let's do so. Thank you.
Thank you. NCC, a communications regulator. CBN regulates the banking the banks. We have DPR regulating the petroleum industry. So there's some experience, and to an extent, NCC maybe is quite efficient at what they do. And maybe there are lessons that we can draw from NCC for NERC. Going to your point about the influence of the minister, the minister clearly doesn't have an overbearing influence on the sector, and he's been saying that it's privatized. There are DISCOs, which is why we've been bashing Jumoke all day. There are DISCOs. It's not a state utility. She doesn't report to the minister. There are GENCOs. Well, engineer out there, you can see he's sitting pretty. He's doing quite well with his hydropower plant. It's a business, and they're doing well. They want to be paid more, but it's not a failed business. So I don't want us to lose sight of that as we have this conversation. We'll go to the back for the question. Gentleman.
Actually not ask questions, but to...
Sorry, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I'd like to not ask questions, but discuss on two issues. The first is eligible customers. The second is system shutdowns. On eligible customers, sorry, I'm director of Simplex Electricity Supply Services Limited. One of my co-directors is Lanrak Babalola, who used to be Minister of Power. The various points made. I would not advise a client to take over any customer who hasn't paid his disco bills. That's just common sense, right? Secondly, every country, I've worked commercially in 5 different countries on this subject, and in every country, the discos fight tooth and nail to keep their customers. And if you're any commercial person, you understand that, yeah? Thirdly, the ongoing payments to disco. There are 2 payments. There's the CDC payment, I think it is, which is a rundown over 3 to 5 years for their profits. The second, and NERC has not made it, that's up to 20%, but NERC has not made a decision. The last one, which is up to the discos as well, and by the way, I've been finding Abuja disco the one that fights least against this. They look to the future more, right? Is distribution charges. Charges to use the wires in a competitive environment. And these have to be negotiated between the discos and NERC. But actually they have to be proposed by the discos. Okay? Now, the other one is for Tom, where I agree with everything he said. However, I'd like to expand it a bit more. I've been here 10 years, and one of the things I do every day is read the NCC operations report. And I have been analysing system shutdowns. And everything Tom said about them is correct. However, what you need to know is that a system shutdown isn't caused by a fault. We design and operate our systems to cope with one fault, right? It's when you either have a massively excessive cascade of a few generators, right? Or we have storm in Lagos that loses 400 megawatts of load in one go. Or more, those are the generation issues. The other one is the transmission issue. Our protection systems, what a protection system does, right, is if there's a fault on a transmission circuit, the protection system sees that fault, and instead of the whole system cascading out, it trips that circuit, yeah? But if the protection is faulty, what can happen is that you have a fault on one circuit and another circuit nearby, the protection sees that fault and trips as well, and you get a double trip. This has happened on the the Niger crossing a few times. And basically, in the last 10 years, I would argue that about 50% of our system shutdowns have had protection contribution. What Tom said was perfectly correct. I'm just expanding a bit. Okay?
Thank you for that contribution. Yeah.
Then a backup will try to clear it, and for the backup to clear it, it extends the zone of trip, and we have a weak grid. It's not robust to stand some of those faults, and the thing goes down. You're correct. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'll take the last question and we'll wrap up. 3 last questions.
Read out 3 questions for TCN especially. My name is Chukwudi Carlo. I reside here in Abuja. The first one, how does the technical fault between the GENCOs and TCN affect the disco in particular and the market in general? We don't seem to be talking about it, we seem to just be punching the discos. But these are contributing factors as to why power is not where it's supposed to be in Nigeria. We don't know these things and we want to know. So how does the technical fault between the GENCOs and the discos affect and TCN affect the discos in particular and the market in general? Second question, still for TCN, how does the interface problem affect the output of the discos? This interface problem we're talking about, does it affect the discos and how? How does it affect the discos? And then the third question, how long does it actually take TCN to repair and resolve a fault? TCN is extremely important in NESI. Now, the GENCOs, everybody talks about the GENCOs, the discos and how they're not doing this, how they're not sending power to here and there. But TCN suffers faults. And when they suffer these faults, power goes out. How long does it actually take TCN to repair and resolve the faults? And then my fourth question is for you too, the moderator. Why are we not talking about vandalism and how it affects the market coordination? Why are we not talking about vandalism? Why are we not talking about electricity theft? And why are we not even talking about the attitude of we, the customers, who tend to want to bypass meters, destroy meters, and even intentionally spoil things, and then we'll come back to blame the discos. So please, I need some clarification in this respect. Thank you.
We wanted to know how interface faults between TCN and GENCO affect disco. If there is a fault upstream, you cannot have power downstream. So it's simple. If we have any problem between GENCOs and TCN, then we'll not be able to relay power to you.
So to save the discos distress, do you go on the media, newspaper, social media anywhere to say this one no be disco problem?
Hang on. No, hang on. You asked a question. But how often do we have such a situation? If we have such a major fault, it could result in system collapse, which everybody would know. So it's not often. The interface problem you referred again to, between which interface? You said interface problem. Which interface? The second question. Which interface? Is it interface between GENCO and TCN, or between TCN and DISCO?
You initially, in your initial submission, you talked about problems between TCN and the DISCOs and TCN and the GENCOs. You summed them as an interface problem. Can you please?
Well, basically, the problem we have with DISCOs is either that they fail to clear their faults, they fail to repair their breakers, and we cannot well power to them. Or they have their protection scheme not working properly, and our scheme will be overlooking there and will be tripping, and when our own trips, it clears wide area, and wide area will be affected.
Sorry, sir, does that also apply to TCN? I mean, the breaker problem and every other problem you mentioned in this concern?
No, I said the interface problem we'll have with you, I just described it. If you have a problem and you don't clear your problem, our own equipment acts as backup to your own equipment. They are coordinated. If your own fails to operate, our own will operate on backup. Take TCN to repair faults. It depends on the fault. But whichever fault it is, we try to have ways of bypassing the faulty equipment and restore supply. Except when we have a complete shutdown, it takes time to build the grid, and that it might take hours to reach. It might take even 24 hours to restore completely. If we have line faults, we have alternate lines to restore supply. Except we have major transformer faults. If we have major transformer faults, it might take some days to resolve. They will resort to giving skeletal services. So it depends on the fault. But whenever we have such major faults, we announce it.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. With regard to my questions, I'm sorry, we're going to have to wrap up soon. It's now 7:50. Vandalism, yes, it's an issue in the sector. It's a major issue. But today we're talking about coordination and corporate governance. Vandalism is something that needs to be addressed across board. There's vandalism at TCN level. There's vandalism at the distribution level. Same thing for electricity theft. The good thing about electricity theft is it's the distribution company that is largely affected. And interestingly, they're very proactive about electricity theft. Now we have laws that, that can be enforced against theft. And they all have, Abuja Disco, for instance, I know has been very active about dealing with electricity theft and prosecuting offenders. Customers, yes, correct. There still needs to be awareness of the sector and advocacy and for all intents and purposes, we need to prepare customers for what is likely to happen going forward. One way or the other, the tariffs have to move. I mean, it's something that we would all have to live with. If you take the most basic metric, which is the exchange rate, and you realize that MITO hasn't been adjusted, since 2016, the rate was 190, it's now 360. It's almost a no-brainer that something has to happen to the rate. So we need to start advocating. As sector experts and participants, we need to start advocating the need to amend the tariff. I will stop there with
vandalism. The years back, vandalism was a serious issue, but it's gone down now because we use anti-vandal bolts and nuts, so the towers are largely safe. But they still strike. They still enter substations, go cutting the copper conductors, earthen conductors, disrupting the flow of earth faults and leading to faults. Indeed, we lost some transformers to that. But to help out, the materials the vandals take, they sell in our markets. And the people most likely to buy those materials will use them for either buildings or for distribution reticulations. So, district and other electrical contractors can equally help by not going to buy such materials from the market. Because if the market is not there, there will be no attraction for them to go vandalize.
Absolutely. So to wrap up, before we wrap up, engineer, 1 minute, final closing remarks, recommendations on the topic at hand, coordination, corporate governance. Any final thoughts?
Just final thought. We've spoken enough. I just forgot to mention this issue of corporate governance. One would want to ask, how independent is the independent system operator? Yes, considering the fact that it resides with TCN. So you cannot be a judge in your own case.
I think next year needs a separate session for that conversation.
Okay.
That's a very interesting conversation. But you raise a valid point.
Yes, thank you.
The ISO is a contentious issue. Do you want to take that on as final
Okay,
thoughts?
let me just say that when Manitoba Hydro was here, part of what they're supposed to do is to unbundle TCN into TSP and ISO, independent companies. Indeed, they got to the point where appointments were made for TSP, appointments for ISO, but somehow, when they left, things started to change. I think it's a very important issue because ISO should be really independent.
Excellent. Jumoke, any final thoughts, recommendations for how the sector should move forward in terms of coordination, corporate governance?
Well, I think it's important, as has been mentioned. I believe the issues that we're talking about today are not necessarily new issues. It's really about taking action. After I've sat through a lot of meetings where lofty ideas, good solutions, but now it's time to take action. Because if we do not take action, if there's no proper coordination, no proper governance, then we'll be back here again having a nice meeting. Yes,
thank you. You make a very valid point. And from me, I think, first of all, thank the eminent panelists. It's been a very interesting conversation. The audience has been very engaged. And, I take away, we all know that there's a problem with coordination, and it's affecting the sector. It's across the value chain. In some parts of the sector, it's better than others. The relationship between generation and TCN seems to be better than the relationship between TCN and the discos, which is purely adversarial. It's almost not happening. Something is going to happen there very soon. It's too toxic. I also feel that the common trend from what I'm hearing is that people think that the NERC can do a lot more with its role coordinating the sector and setting out new regulation. There are some thoughts around what the ministry can be doing. The minister has been very clear about what he believes his role is. And, we need to move beyond, the minister's role in the sector. The sector should be driven primarily by the players and regulated like many of the other sectors that we have in Nigeria, like the DPR is doing a great job moving the petroleum industry forward. NCC is doing a great job with telecoms. And that's the way that our sector should evolve. In terms of distribution, my view is that the distribution companies that we have today, 10, 15 years from now, will be different. You will have mini-grids. You will have a building like Transcorp being a mini-grid interconnected with Abuja Disco, and there'll be all sorts of interesting models that will happen. And it is this period that we are going through this evolution that the groundwork and the platform and the foundation should be laid. So I will stop there. I thank you all for listening to me. Thank you very much for coming. I'll call Nextier to come and take over this session. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. A round of applause for our wonderful panelists. Also, thank you everyone in the room for coming to the March Nextier Dialogue. We have these every third Wednesday of the month. The next one is April 17th, where we want to continue this conversation around corporate governance and around how to get the grid to function better. There's still drinks and food in the room. One of the reasons we do this event is to create opportunities for you guys to network with one another. So without any more words from me, you're dismissed and have a good night. Thank you.